I work I work now in as a Meta, formerly it was Facebook. Um, I specialize recruiting for product designers in enterprise, infrastructure, and consumer. And of course, we have other products in the company too that I've also kind of worked on. I've worked on all levels from IC levels out of boot camps in college to director level. So I've been through it all before. Meta, just a quick preview. I worked at Boston Consulting Group, another BCG Digital Ventures. It's a consulting company, and I was a recruiter there. And I worked for a large recruiting agency, staffing agency called Creative Group. It was a Robert Half company. And before that, worked in the design space, started a large meetup. I do a lot in Slack channels and design space and everything. And now here, talking to you guys about Mento and so forth. But yeah, thanks for everything. And I look forward to talking to everyone and so forth.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that intro.
You're
Carl,
welcome.
I believe as designers, we should always start with a little bit of empathy, right? That's we're being taught everywhere. So how does a day in the life of a recruiter looks like, especially at Meta
Yeah.
where it's like so popular?
Yeah. So, at first, we go through different, I would say, hiring cycles. So it all depends on headcount and so forth. So I usually, start my day on, we use we have internal tools for looking for candidates and resumes and portfolios. But my morning is basically spent just looking for portfolios and resumes all day. I use LinkedIn Recruiter, which a lot of companies use to find talent. And I use, of course, Dribble and Behance and so forth for portfolio sites. And so that's pretty much how I kind of start my day. I'm looking at our portfolios, but we always work closely with our hiring managers and so forth on kind of what they're kind of looking for their different teams, right? So infrastructure, maybe we have tools for our data center. So I'll go out, look for candidates for our, to work on those tools, right? Or WhatsApp or, and so forth, right? So we just go through a design brief and I go through all the looking for candidates and then I scour all those resume sites, right? And so, also my job is to work again closely with the hiring managers. And so recruiting is kind of that sometimes first line of defense. I always say, your first contact. We have tons and tons of recruiters, big recruiting team. So usually we're the first ones to look at resumes and so forth. And if maybe sometimes a hiring manager gets a resume, the candidate will have to talk to us, right? But some companies, smaller companies, are not maybe as fortunate to have recruiters. So then the product design managers or design managers and so forth are the ones kind of doing the recruiting too, right? So we have, we have, numbers ahead and we do a lot with diversity. We work with our teams, in Europe and Asia and so forth, all over the world. Yeah, I think, remote working has changed a lot. So, now we're hiring all over, which is nice, right? So now I'm able to hire different candidates in different places. So I think it just broadens the talent out there. But yeah, it's pretty much my full day of recruiting life.
Awesome. And this is just a personal curiosity, but
Yeah,
how many portfolios and resumes would you say you go through in a month?
I would say so I probably reach out. Let's break it down. I reach out probably to about 50 to 100 candidates a week. So I would say I could look at 1,000-ish, right? So all depends on kind of what we're looking for, of course, right? So if I'm looking for developer tools, people with developer tools experience, then it might, I probably won't look at as many portfolios. maybe there's not that many candidates that work on developer tools, right?
Right.
So I would say a thousand ish, I would say, or
Okay.
more.
Yeah, that is definitely a lot, and I think this is one of the things that I tell junior designers or our students is people, companies when they hire, they see thousands and thousands of portfolios and resumes, so it is really important for a good first impression, right, or standing out, because then you get when you're one out of 1,000, it's pretty fierce competition.
Yeah, yeah. And we could go over some after later. There's kind of things we look at portfolios to kind of stand out, right? It's kind of a sales and marketing piece, right? You need to sell yourself and market yourself to other recruiters first, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
we could go through that another time too.
Yeah, yeah, right. Okay, so now that I mentioned, and you said, hey, I might be looking on an average month at about 1,000-ish portfolios. Um, I think there's an elephant in the room. I'm not seeing it, but I know it is, and that is people thinking the UX job market is absolutely saturated, and there's no room for anyone to come in now. Would you agree with that, or how do you see it?
Yeah, I'll probably disagree in a way. Yes, there's a lot of designers. I think, developers and designers, it's a hot market, right? And a lot of people, I've met a lot of people, I think primarily from boot camps, is a lot of people were maybe lawyers before and now they're a UX designer, right? For example,
Right.
or, they're veterinarian, right? Now UX designer, right? So I think that helped. I think that's why boot camps and everything are done so well. I think it's great, right? For people that want to get out of their kind of old job market and into, design.
And
Um,
if I'm not
Second,
mistaken, if I'm not mistaken, you're also a bootcamp graduate, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So um, I've done classes at several boot camps. I went to university. I went to Academy of Art University for a year there, and then I kind of got into design for a while, and then got into recruiting, right? But I think there's lots of jobs out there. I think you have to be patient and do the homework and look for them. I think a lot of companies go through cycles, so sometimes they'll hire more junior talent and then senior talent, junior talent, senior talent. This is because they need a lot more senior talent, so they can mentor a lot of the junior candidate
Right.
designers, right? And it really all depends on the project that they're working on, also. But I think there's lots of jobs out there. I think there's lots of tips on applying online, messaging a recruiter at that company or another designer. Hey, my name is Carl. I applied at this position. Please take a look at my portfolio. So your resume is not falling into a black hole, for example.
Right. Right. And kind of moving to smaller animals, how do you solve the chicken and egg problem of, your first role and then experience? Because people seem or companies seem to want experience in your first role, but you need a first role to get experience.
Yeah. I The way I look at it personally is I think just building your portfolio and getting projects, right? So I think if it's doing doing some work through project through your guys' boot camp, right? Or Upwork, Fiverr, freelancer.com, Nine Designs, friends, family. I think there's any way you could get some projects and experience. I think it helps a lot, right? And I think just networking a lot through LinkedIn groups, Slack channels, meetups, other boot campers that you're working with. But I think there's plenty of jobs out there. I think right now, this, of course, this go through cycles again, right?
Right.
But look at anything else. Love its numbers game. You have to apply to a lot of companies, and that's just how you're gonna get your job.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. For the people that just joined us in the meantime, we're here with Carl, who's a product design recruiter at Meta, formerly known as Facebook, and we're kind of learning how and what to do to be successful in our job hunt and our career. Before we move forward, I want to remind everyone that if you stick all the way to the end, we're going to give some bonuses to everyone. And also, we're going to open a round of Q&A a bit later on with Carl. So I'm going to let you know when to do that. And you can type in your questions in the chat, and we're going to answer some of those given the time that we have. Now, let's get a little bit more into this. What are some pros and cons of enrolling in a bootcamp to accelerate your transition to the UX industry? And you yourself have been bootcamp graduates, but also you have like formal training, so you kind of seen it all, and you also hire people. So, what are the pros and cons of bootcamps?
Yeah, I think boot camps are great just because it's hard to, let's say someone was a nanny, right? It'd be really hard, or a doctor, it'd be hard to go back to art school for 4 years or university for 4 years and then doing a cycle again. So I think boot camps are great. I think a lot of companies respect boot camps, and there's definitely a few good ones. I think they compress everything in 3-6 months, however the program is, and they support you after your boot camp is over, right? I think they do a lot better job now on. I think boot camps definitely need to. I think a lot of candidates need kind of hand-holding times afterwards and confidence, right? And that's why I think you guys do a very good job on kind of working with candidates after the boot camp, right? To help you support them and help you to find their first job, right? And I think working closely with recruiters at different agencies or other companies definitely helps to find that first job also, right?
Awesome, thank you. Anything that you see as a con to this, like something that's not so great about boot camps? Let's not praise them altogether. Let's also see like what could be improved.
I think it's a lot better now. I think years ago, I would say some boot camps did, let's say, for example, in the US, Pizza Hut is a very they're in Europe too, actually, and all over, right? So Pizza Hut's a very big company. So sometimes I'll see some boot camps, using Pizza Hut for a lot of their candidates, for designers. So like, I'll know exactly when someone applies, and I see like Pizza Hut, I'll be like, okay, well, they're from a certain boot camp, right?
So a lot of their like portfolios portfolio projects that the students do in the boot camp.
Sorry, yeah. So I think a lot of them are the same, right? So I think trying to work with other maybe small startups or so forth, that'd be great for boot camps to team up with. I'm sure it's difficult, but I think if we were able to work with other companies, work on small projects, I think that would help candidates out kind of, real work that they're working on, real life work, right? I think concept projects are fine to build a portfolio, right? I think con, that was the only con I would say, and some boot camps don't work with candidates afterwards. I know, you guys do. So I think that's a huge positive. So I think those are the only two cons, but I think boot camps do a very good job now than they did maybe 7, 8 years, 10 years ago when the first few kind of came out.
Right. Yeah. They evolved as well with the industry and adapted to what was needed. All right. So you've graduated from your boot camp, or you're ready to go into your first role. And you look at job descriptions, and oftentimes these look very demanding. So, and it's almost like an impossible list to check all of those items. What would you say are actually the top 2-3 things that a company might look in a candidate, in a junior candidate?
Yeah, I'm a big believer on UI and visuals. I think, this is my personal opinion. I think, a lot of, for portfolios, for example, right? I think a lot of people can do wireframes, personas, But I think a lot of the companies hire on, obviously do an interview process, but if you look at a portfolio for the first time, it's all visuals,
Right.
right? So I think that's a very important thing for a designer to focus on, because even though a lot of companies now design systems, design library, design patterns, but they want to see the craft, right? And I think
Right.
the better you are at your craft, UI craft, visual craft, right, is I think way better chance I think on laying your first job.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Would there be anything on the second and third place for a junior candidate?
Yeah, I think it's I think just I think it's important for look at the job description. I think it's if it's a few years experience, I would say apply anyway. Sometimes they're really generic, right? And some companies they will just kind of they'll probably keep a job out there, right, on like Indeed or Dribble, and just keep it going, right? So behind the scenes, they're hiring for maybe junior or senior or lead or whatever it may be. So you never really know. So I think if you find a job for like 2-3 years experience, I'll definitely always apply for it, right? Because you never know, right? And it's all timing, I think, right? So I think definitely if you're coming out of boot camp, um, definitely definitely apply hands down. If it's 2-3 years experience, try applying because you never know what they're really hiring for in the background.
Right, right. And I have a really interesting insight here. So I've been in design for about 18 years. And to be honest, even at this level, some job descriptions seem overwhelming. It's like, oh my God, this is such a huge list. I don't imagine who can check all of them. But also, what I found interesting is for the many roles that I got throughout my career, if I would look back now, at the job descriptions, I wouldn't still be able to check most of like all of them, right? So still
Yeah,
really interesting.
yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of companies these days, I think it all depends, right? I think a lot of companies want product designer, right? That's a new term, I'll say new-ish term, right? So I think a lot of people used to be a UI UX designer, right, or a UX designer, right? And now a lot of companies will on their job will say product designer, right? So it's kind of like they want a candidate that maybe has done some research, right? Some candidates that have user experience background, user interface background, which I think it's probably more common now, right? But it was pretty hard to find years ago, right?
Right.
And so I think a lot of companies are keeping it very generic now, where they're looking for a product designer that works from that end-to-end design, right? So it's hard where obviously like I'm very like for people that will say like on job description, oh, I need coding experience,
Okay.
right?
That's a big one with designers.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I think if you go to a big company like Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Microsoft, and so forth, you don't really need that experience because they have thousands of developers, right?
Right.
If you go to a 5-person company and they really need a front end developer, and you have that experience, and you're good at it, I think that could probably get you the job right over somebody else, right? Just because that's one less person they need to hire, right?
Right.
So I think it all depends on the company's size and the resources that they need, right? But I think research, right? I think a lot of boot camps will teach you about personas and so forth, and it's kind of that research part that will help
Okay.
out, right?
So
But yeah, that's probably.
should boot camps also teach coding for design?
Personally, I don't think so. I think there are, Code Academy and other, boot camps out there that do design, but I think interaction, right? So a lot of job description will have interaction, right? So interaction tools, right? You have Figma, Sketch, and so forth, right? So I think interaction design is important because I think that's kind of part of the job. So I think, having that experience will help out also.
Right, right. Cool. Everyone, just I typed in the chat, but I want to announce it here as well. We're gonna take questions from the audience in a short while, so type in your questions if you have any. Carl, what do you think makes a candidate stand out from the crowd? So you mentioned like you're going through 1,000, roughly 1,000 portfolios or
Yep.
applications each month. What makes a candidate stand out from the crowd, and what do successful candidates consistently do?
Yeah. I think it's back to user interface and visuals. I
Okay.
think I believe, if someone just looks at someone doesn't know you, they haven't interviewed you, need a portfolio, or I pull up on Behance and I find your portfolio. I usually look at, do they have, yes, wireframes, personas, and I think all the boot camps do a good job of doing that. And I think candidates have that these days. I think a lot of it is just design your portfolio how you want to be presented, right? I think, using WordPress or Wix or Squarespace, I don't think it matters. I don't think you need to code your own portfolio unless you really want to. But I think using UI kits, like putting your iPhone or Android screens that you're designing into a phone, I think put on your portfolio. I think it looks nice, right? Present your, I think, portfolio clear, right? And just make sure it's not a mess, right? So I
Right.
think having it organized, and I think having all those different steps, and I think having talk about explain on your portfolio. I think another nice thing is if you've worked with a UX researcher or an engineer or a product manager, put that also, right? You don't need to put the person's names. We could say, oh, in this project with Pizza Hut, I worked with a UX researcher, 2 developers. They're all remote. I think a lot of companies look for that now also, but it's not a huge deal. But a lot of companies want to see that you've worked with other cross-functional partners and teams.
Okay.
So you're able to work with those teams, right? So I think that helps a lot also. Are talking about, what work you did versus what you and your team worked on, right? Those are all good, maybe bullet points to put on your portfolio.
I think
Right? This
you
kind of gives more information.
I think you brought up a really good point because this is something that I've heard throughout the industry again and again, and that is it detrimental to your portfolio to have a project that you've done in a group? So like some boot camps do solo projects, every student works on their project. Some boot camps do like group projects, so you're going to have like 3 or 4 designers on a project. Is that good or bad?
I would say, if I had to choose, I would say good, maybe.
Okay.
Um, I would say, it all depends, right? I think it's nice because then they know that you're able to work in a group setting,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're not always doing everything, right?
Right.
So I think it's nice to talk about that you worked with 4 other product designers, because maybe someone worked on some of the icons, someone worked on the personas and research and
Mm-hmm.
some of that. So I think it'll be easy for you to transition into a team setting,
Right.
right? If you're a part of a one person, and I think it'll also help you go into workforce and working with other cross-functional teams like engineering and so forth,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't think it hurts you for a sole designer, but I think it's just hard to go to different companies as a sole designer. I would say I think it's tough because if you're part of a 5-person company team, 5-person company, you probably will be a sole designer, right? And so you're just not able to learn as much, I would say.
Right.
All right, but I think if you have a team, you definitely will learn from others.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point because I was gonna ask like, what do you feel would be more suitable for growth or for like a first role in UX? Would it be like a big company or like a smaller startup or agency?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think you'll probably learn the most from other people from a big company. I would say there's lots more support,
Hmm.
and there's lots of growth, right? And it's I would say sometimes more stable. But then also, your personality is go 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 and wants to be something different all the time, then I'd probably start out at a startup or an agency, right? That's kind of how I started my recruiting career and so forth. I
Right.
worked for an agency, and because I like working with different companies, and now I'm able to be a little more, I'll say, stable. And but luckily we have a bunch of different products, so I'm able to work with different teams, right?
Right.
But yeah, I think it's yeah.
So getting a little bit back to kind of what can a candidate do to stand out. So you mentioned obviously the aesthetics of the portfolio. It needs to look polished. You need to have like good UI because kind of everyone learns how to do personas and user flows and all of that. But like the craft really matters. Is there anything else maybe in the application process or like how they approach the job that they could do to maximize their chances in securing that role?
Yeah, I think so. I've heard a lot of people, talk about people about cover letters. I haven't seen cover letters for a long time, at least on my end. Maybe every country is different and so forth,
Okay.
but I haven't seen cover letters that much. The way I like to tell people to apply for jobs is always go online and apply directly to their website, if they have one, right, or LinkedIn or Indeed or whatever it may be, and then go on LinkedIn and search for a recruiter at that company if they have one, and say, hey, hi Carl, my name is Ted. I just joined. I'm looking for a new position. Here's my resume and portfolio. Please get back to me if you have any openings, right?
Right.
I think it's about building a link. If they might not have any openings that time, but hopefully they'll think of you, right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of just marketing yourself,
Right.
right? So I think that's probably one of the best ways, I think, to get a job, and I think apply to as many companies as you can, right? I think another important thing which will help also, I think sometimes is, let's say I grew up playing golf, and I play golf all the time, right? So I might try to apply for different positions and maybe at golf companies, just because I know that space really well and I have a
Right.
background in that. So there could be an edge on that where they might think about that space, so they might hire you for that position, right? So,
Right.
and I think you'll be more excited. So I think always apply for companies that you'll be excited to work on, right,
Right.
or work
This
for.
I'm really happy you brought this up because this is exactly the framework for projects at Mento. So we align the background of the person with the industry that they would like to work in as a designer, and then we build projects based on that to speak to that industry and their background. So I'm really happy to hear
Perfect.
exactly. I know. Thank you. So
Yeah.
you mentioned cover letters. How do you feel about application videos? Are those useful? Do they help stand out?
Um, I have not seen that many, just because you can't upload them usually.
Okay.
I get unless I guess you can embed like a YouTube link
Hmm.
on your resume, but I have not seen any. I don't see. I think it's probably a good idea, right? But I don't see, if there's 100 of them. I don't see a recruiter clicking on all of them. Um, but I think having a lot of keywords on your resume helps too, right?
Right.
Resume and LinkedIn. You could put pronouns if you want to. You could put finance or B2B or B2C, which is business to business or business to consumer. What kind of things you're interested in? You could put if you're part of a sorority or frat or any
Okay.
groups, right? I think there's anything that recruiters can search and find your profile. right? So user experience, UI, UX, user interface, write out letters, right? Write out the words, right? There's a lot of things you could put in your resume and your LinkedIn, because that's how a lot of recruiters research. A lot of recruiters research keywords. That's how they'll find your profile.
Okay. That's
Right.
really good to know. All right, last
Yeah.
question from me, and then we go to the audience. So, my question was like, what are some do's and don'ts of job seeking? I think we covered a lot of do's. So, what are some don'ts? You know, like wrong answers only. What could you do to totally mess up your chances, or like be, you know, get to the
Yeah.
bottom of the pile?
I think in, all right. This is not always true, but I think sometimes when I see resumes and they'll say UX, this is a big thing, like I'll say a couple years ago, they'll say user experience design and they'll put like 3 stars or like 80%, right? And they'll be like
Oh
user
my God, I hate
interface,
those.
110%, right? So if you look up like resume templates a long time ago, they used to always have those, right? So I think don't put that. I think just put like user experience, user interface. That's what you work on. But don't put anything like
The skill
stars or
bars.
percentages.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't do skill bars, right? Because I think it sets you up for failure in a way, right? Uh,
Right.
so when you're interviewing, you want to be 100% everything, right? In a way. So you don't want to put 40%. I think that's a don't. I think people that I would say, always act in interviews. I think always act excited and like smile, act happy, act, excited
Right.
about the opportunity, because that goes a long way, right? I think another do again is to apply online, follow up with a recruiter. Don't harass them, but I'll mess them maybe once every few weeks, and then just to build relationships with other recruiters or designers at those companies. Another don't, I would say keep your resume pretty simple. So a lot of companies use an applicant tracking system.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you put like a bunch of bubbles and designs on your resume. It doesn't read
Huh.
it correctly, so they're not able to upload it. I'm sure they're getting smarter, but just keep a nice PDF or a Word doc of your resume, because sometimes a lot of those things can't read them. I think having another important thing is on your resume and LinkedIn is have your portfolio link. If you want to, there are companies that there's an NDA where you have to,
Mm-hmm.
you really can't show the work. Then I guess put a password. But I feel like a long time ago there was no such thing as NDA. No one had passwords, but now everyone has a password on their portfolio. I think
Right.
truly, if you need one, do them. But a lot of candidates, sometimes use it for tricks where they'll put a portfolio because they just
Hmm.
want to get in front of that person to showcase their work,
And you
right?
don't. You don't get in
So
front, right? With a password.
no, I think it turns off people, right? So if you truly need to put a password, right? But if you don't, do not put a password on your portfolio.
Right.
There's no reason to.
What
And
about?
it,
Sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm done. I was done.
What about, because this is one of the things that I've stumbled across lately interviewing a lot of people. What about taking the interview off your phone?
Yeah, I would say if you don't have anything else, then you go for it, right? But if you have iPad or computer, I think it just makes you. I think you should always take an interview somewhere in a quiet area, right? Or I guess in your car in a nice area, right? If you have to, right? It all depends. People's lifestyles are different, right? But I think having it on a computer or another device, I think this looks a lot more professional, right?
Right.
And again, you want to sell yourself, right? It's marketing, right?
Exactly.
So that's where you're able to smile and excited, and they could see that, right? If you're walking around the mall then you're probably not serious about it, right? And it's probably not gonna work out, most likely.
I don't know if this happened to you, but the worst that I had was someone taking the interview from the beach. They were actually in their swimsuit as well. It was that was
I've not had that one yet, but that would be hilarious.
yeah. They were like, I'm on holiday, but
Interesting.
I'm interviewing.
Yeah, I another thing is so we're at our company we do a very good job of like if you're on PTO or paid time off or vacation, sorry, you're on vacation, right? So a lot of candidates will tell me I'm on vacation in Mexico or Hawaii, and I'm able to do your interview if you want to. And like I think some companies will be like, oh, God, that person's a go getter, right? But then I think another way to look at it is like I was like, just wait until you're back home. It's
Right.
we could wait, right? You're on vacation. We respect that, right? So I think doing your interview when you're able to, not on vacation unless you really have to, right? But just do it in a professional setting as much as possible.
That's true. I completely agree, and this is something that I tell all of the designers in my team. Even if we're remote and interviewing online, first impressions still matter. So if the
Yeah,
first thing that the recruiter sees is your chin because you're holding the phone like this, that's not really professional
yeah,
in any way.
yeah. And I think everyone tries to take bias out of interviews,
True.
right? But I think first impressions are a big deal, are very important. So, if you dress nicely, it all depends on the person on the other side what they think, right? And that's why I always say, if you smile and have a nice, excited tone in your voice, and act interested, it goes a long way because a lot of people are, they're doing a lot of interviews that day, most likely, or that week, and they're probably tired. And it's just nice to like see someone excited and engaged and happy,
Right.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
It goes a long way.
I completely agree. Something that I was doing back when I was going to interviews for roles is I almost made like a experience out of it, right? So the things that I
Yeah,
said, the jokes that I did, the kind of I took control of the interview experience, and I was like, okay, guys, well, welcome here. Welcome to my interview. I'm gonna tell you all about me. You're gonna see my work. We're
yeah,
gonna start with this. We're gonna continue with that, and people were super engaged because of that, right? Because
yeah,
at least my experience in recruiting has been that a lot of the candidates will like be like super low tone, no energy, and it almost communicates like I'm not interested in this job. I'm doing you a favor for being here, which is kind of weird.
yeah, yeah. I think energy. I think it goes a long. It might sound silly, but I think it goes a long way. Right.
Exactly. Okay, well, I think we have only about 15 minutes left, so let's take some questions from the audience. Carla is asking, so she has a lot of experience of working before graduating from college. She's 30, and her question is, would she qualify for a senior position in this case because she did have a lot of previous experience, or should she pursue a junior role instead?
How many years experience was it?
It doesn't say how many
You
years of
said. Oh,
experience.
so every company is different, right? So at big companies like I would say, Facebook, Amazon, um, Google, they have different. They have what's called IC positions. So they'll say IC3, IC4, IC5, IC6,
Hmm.
and so forth. I would say um, the levels get a little choppy when you get to Facebook has 3,000 designers,
Wow.
right? And so give or take like a couple hundred,
Hmm.
right? So if and so sometimes people have like 4 or 5 years experience may not be a senior designer at a company that has 3,000 designers, but they will be at a 10-person company, for
Right.
example, right? So companies do levels a lot differently. There's a website called levels.io,
Yeah.
FYI,
Yeah.
right? That do a good job on leveling, right? And then you'll go to banks, for example. So Chase, which is an American bank, and Wells Fargo and JP Morgan, um, they will use vice president as a title
Okay.
for designers.
Wow.
So I think everyone will say vice president. Okay, they're probably in the industry for like 30, 20 years, maybe, right? But a lot of banks will use that title vice president, but a lot of candidates only have 3 or 4 years experience.
Right.
So that's what banks do, right? So, and then you'll get, and then on the other hand, you'll see a lot of candidates that have 1 or 2 years experience, but they'll be at a four-person company, but they'll be head of design, right?
Okay.
So every company looks at years experience differently. So a lot of companies based on years experience on and how well you interview,
Right.
right? So I would say apply anyways. You could try to apply. Worst case to be a no, but if it's a couple years experience, it's probably that junior mid-level position still. But it really all depends on the size of the company. Again,
Right. Right.
everyone's
I
different.
I do think so. Carla replied that she had about 6 years of experience. It wasn't
Saw it.
clear if this was in design or in another domain, right? So,
Yeah,
um,
some. So what I've seen is design. Perfect. So I think a senior position, 6 years. I think that's good. I think that's fair, right?
right.
If it's a lot of companies will use design experience, right? So if it's graphic
Hmm.
design, UI, UX, product design. But if you're a lawyer for like 20 years and design for 2 years, the
Right.
lawyer probably won't count as much.
Right. Obviously,
Right.
unless
Yeah,
you go and be a designer in the law space, and then
exactly.
you have an
It
upper
could help.
hand. Yeah, definitely.
I agree. I agree.
All right. Antonio was asking like what elements on a portfolio can wow a recruiter. I think we covered this. Taking care of the UI and making sure your portfolio
I
is
think so.
neat. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Okay, next question is from Todd. So he's asking, when reaching out to a recruiter, what's a more impactful and memorable way? So you did mention, hey, kind of when you're applying, look up the recruiter on LinkedIn and
Yep.
message them. So he's asking, what's a impactful and memorable way to form a relationship than saying, hey, I applied to X job, let's connect? Is there a way you prefer to be communicated with?
Yeah. I think on LinkedIn when someone messages you, people forget, right? And
Hmm.
people forget to read messages. So I always say follow up, right? I think you could also look at their LinkedIn profile and you say, oh, I saw you worked at Fitbit. I was a huge fan of Fitbit when you were there, 8 years ago. It's really cool how you work at Spotify now. Love to, I love Spotify, I love music, and I'm really interested on working there, right? If you know any positions that are open, please, let me know. Here's my, portfolio, right? So I think try to put some kind of personal connection in there. I know it's tough; you're missing a lot of people, but I don't think you need to. I think just sending them a nice message that maybe why you like the company and why you're interested, but I wouldn't say like keep it open ended, right? So say I wouldn't say like please apply for me. Here's my resume. I would say if you ever come across any positions that look good for my portfolio, please reach out to me, right? And you can follow up every, once a month, every few weeks, right? I think because a lot of people forget, right?
Right.
And I think it's all timing, right? So I might not have a position right now, but might get a new one tomorrow, right? So I think following up and being persistent
You bring
is
up a good
key.
point. How like what would be the ideal follow up in time? Like a week, two, a
Yeah,
month?
I would say like 2, 3 weeks. And I would say sometimes you could follow up. I want to be annoying, but I would maybe do 3 weeks and then like 3 weeks and then, give it some time, right?
Okay, yeah,
Um, but I think if you email someone 4 times, they're going to get back to you at some point,
right.
right? It's like the recruiters reach out to me, right? For other companies looking for a job. Like if I'm interested in looking, coming to their company, and sometimes I'll forget to respond to them, but they email me a second time or third time, I'm going to get back to them and say something,
Right.
right? I think people are busy, and I think naturally sometimes people just forget, right? So I think just following up helps a
Right.
lot.
That is
All
true. That
right.
is true. All right. Um, Tiffany is asking, what are some things that bootcamp graduates should avoid putting in their portfolios to avoid them from being too cookie cutter? That's really interesting.
Um, let's see. I would I would put to cookie cutter. Let's see. I would avoid putting projects that don't present yourself well, right?
Okay.
So let's, for example, I think design work that I think if you worked in design, let's say for a couple of years informally, and then you went to a boot camp, like you have all these projects that are from like Windows 98, for example, that are in there and outdated. I would probably delete them, right,
Okay.
or take them out, right? I'd probably show, a couple of projects that stand out. Um, Cookie cutter, I would say if you went to a boot camp and they all used Pizza Hut,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I would change it to Domino's
Okay.
or another brand, right?
Right.
Just because that recruiter is not looking at 100 Pizza Hut portfolios,
Yeah.
right? But I think those are the only things I could think about. I think a lot of portfolios look pretty similar these days.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think having, you know, I think a lot of boot camps will kind of not train, but help their candidates organize their portfolio, like putting what they worked on top and personas and some low fidelity wireframes and high fidelity. So you
Does
can
that
always
help?
mix it up. Um, I wouldn't I wouldn't say it'll get you the job. I think it helps to showcase what you've done. But I think it's always I look at a lot of portfolios, and so and you got to think about a lot of recruiters do not have a design background.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of recruiters are probably looking at portfolios that look nice,
Okay.
right, and look pretty, look well, right, well done, right. And that's kind of what's going to get you to that next phone call or whatever it may be,
Right.
right. So I always say, if you can, try to grab their attention at the very beginning, right? So maybe put a nice visual or two that grabs their attention. Then you could put all of your other personas and whatever you need to put wireframes. And at the very end, put some more high fidelity screens, right? And make them large where people can actually see them, right? So if it's like click on the button and it makes it bigger, that's fine. Or just make bigger screens where, recruiters or other designers can look at your work pretty quickly and easily, for
Right.
sure. So I think
Right.
that'll help stand out, I think, too.
Yeah. That is a really good one. Like make if you put any visuals, like I see a lot of times designers doing this in their portfolio, they put like a visual or a design or something, but it's like tiny, tiny and you can't see it. And I think
Yeah.
another great takeaway that you mentioned is a lot of a lot of recruiters do not have a design background. So it's all about kind of recognizing some craft and some quality, which, they don't need certain training for that. And that kind of gets you to the next step, which brings me, you did say something really interesting, which is, if you have a project from like 5 years ago, Windows 95 kind of thing, 20 years ago, you want to remove it. And this brings me to a great point, which is a lot of bootcamp graduates, right? They come from, they've been in the past like a lawyer, or they had like these random positions, like, I tended for tables for like a couple of months, and then I've
Yeah.
went to do this and then went to do that. Or even like having full-blown careers in a different field like marketing or like sales, and then they turn to design, so now they're a designer. Should they keep in their resume and on their LinkedIn profile, should they keep their previous experience, or should they clean it up?
I would clean up a little bit, right? If you have 30 years experience, there's probably going to be a lot of, a lot of pages, possibly, right? So what you could do, right, is when I was doing design work, I think I put like Carl Wheatley Design, for example, and then I put
Hmm.
like to work for Design Lab or Mento Design Academy, and I worked, did stuff for Samsung, and I'll kind of put like a few companies and projects under Carl Wheatley Design, and then I worked for formerly Facebook and Meta and so
Right.
forth, right? So I think sometimes you could group things, right? Where like, between you know 96 and 87, I was a waiter, a waitress, and I worked at this beer company that I worked at, lawyer and so forth, right? And just put the years, right? But I think if you're looking for a design job, I think just group those together and then put your design experience, right?
Right.
And nice bullet points where a lot of recruiters, can read kind of what you've worked on and so forth.
Right. One thing that we
Right.
tell our students is once they're completed the boot camp, once they, know they start to apply to jobs, fully commit to it. Because a lot of times, like people, what we'll do, we'll say like lawyer and UX designer in training. And then, I imagine when a recruiter comes to a page like this, they're like, so they're a lawyer or they're a UX, do they want to work in this field, right? So it's like, I'm not sure
Yeah.
what you want to be.
Yeah, yeah. I think make it clear, right? And then put as many keywords on your LinkedIn and so forth if possible.
Right. Carl,
Yeah.
this was really informative. So thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're almost at time. I know there were a lot of questions that we didn't get to answer. So you can reach out to Carl. I believe you offer consultations on your website. So I'm going to put in the links here to Mento, to
Yeah.
Carl. And then for everyone that's stuck around here, we have an amazing offer today. So we're going to give you a code that's $100 off on your first payment and then 1 free month, which is your last month in the program. So essentially it's instead of paying for 6 months, it's 5 months. So that's $1,000 in value. I'm going to post the links here. And then what I also encourage you is to post your LinkedIn profile. So we're going to leave the room open. We're not going to close it. And then post your LinkedIn profile so you can connect with everyone here. So just go to your LinkedIn profile, copy the link, paste it here in the chat so people can add you. I'm going to turn off the cameras and we're gonna leave, but I'm going to leave the room open for a little while so we can connect and go beyond just an event that ended. The recording will also be available on our YouTube channel. Carl, thank you so much again for joining us,
Thank you.
giving so much valuable advice. To be honest, I learned a little bit as well today, so I really appreciate
Nice.
that. If you want to talk more with Carl, if you want to book him for like a consultation, you can find that on his website. The links are in the chat. And then, I guess I'll see you at more Mento events. We'll have Carl do sessions with our students. So if you want to, work with Carl, definitely you can do on his website or by
Yeah.
enrolling in our bootcamp. Carl, have an awesome rest of your day. Thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us. And I'll see you. Goodbye.
One last
Oh
thing.
yeah, sure,
One
sure.
last thing, if I can. Thank you, everyone. And I have maxed out on my connections on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So if you can, please follow me or message me if you need one-off questions. I can help you out. But I'm not able to connect because I've maxed out. Like I
What's
think
the
it's like
maximum?
30,000. I think it's 35,000 people.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm not an influencer or anything, but
Are we
I could be
connected?
maybe. But
Now
I think we are. Yeah,
I feel
yeah. privileged. Sometimes I'm about to delete people a long time ago and then put new ones on, right? But follow me or connect with me, and definitely thanks for everything. I appreciate it.
Awesome. I'll just post the links once more here so that they don't get lost in the chat. Okay. Carl, thank you. Have an
Thank you.
amazing day. Goodbye.
Thanks so much. Bye bye.